Hey everyone, and welcome back to another video on the channel. This one is going to be a bit of a different one because this one is going to be about my workshop right here. I've actually been meaning to do a video about my setup that I've got going on down here for quite a while. Thing is, though, I never really thought that anyone would be interested in it, but someone left a comment on my last video, which was about the GTX 660, asking if there was a way to see what I've got going on down here. So that's my excuse to make this video, and I guess without further ado, I'm just going to get right into it, starting from the left. Over here, got my trusty hot air gun. I don't have a proper hot air rework station yet, so for, say, reflowing memory modules, like I did in the 580 video, I use this thing. Usually I set it to 350 degrees Celsius. 350 degrees, I believe, is kind of the sweet spot, as it is high enough to get components up to temperature fast, but not so high that you end up damaging them. Same goes for this thing right here. This is just the typical, I don't know, like Amazon 858D, I believe. I could be wrong about that. Hot air rework station. The main thing I use this thing for, however, is just like heat shrink or like really small components, because yeah, these are not particularly powerful, kind of to be expected, because like these are like dirt cheap. Back here you can see I've got a bunch of heat shrink. There's some more flux, some 3.3 volt regulators. Then down below there should be some 5 volt regulators. Then if I get this flux out of the way, you can see there's a bunch of solder, and this black thing right there, that's the UV flashlight that I use for curing. Let me get this back in there. That's the UV flashlight that I use for curing solder resist. Moving on, I guess, you know, your typical IR thermometer. That's also the one that I used in the GTX 580 video to check the PCB temperature. And right here is the spool of wire that you also saw in a recent video of mine. And then this right here is basically my stash of things that I use for soldering. I keep it in these beakers right here that I bought for etching silicon, which I do that sometimes as well. But I've got my tweezers here, solder sucker, more tweezers, a block of wood for when I'm working on small components and I don't want to burn this surface right here. That's what I use that for. And then down in here you can see just a bunch of components, capacitors, there's a potentiometer. And then over here, kind of the same story, except that it's you know, more like solder equipment. Then right here, this is the e-power that I use to inject voltage into short circuits, for example. The GTX 1080 short that I diagnosed and fixed. I made a YouTube short about that. I use this thing right here to find the short. The reason, by the way, is, that I use one of these is because I don't have like a proper benchtop power supply. And this thing right here outputs pretty much exactly 1 volt. And I can inject voltage into VCore, VMEM, PEX, really anything, because 1 volt doesn't damage them, right? So very useful for that. For like e-powering a graphics card, it's not too useful because, as you can see, it's just a 4-phase. I believe this used to be like a reference 560, so yeah, whatever. I use it pretty much exclusively for short hunting these days. Though with that said, it is actually a triple output e-power, right? So I've got core right here, this right here is VMEM, and this one right there is PEX. So technically it's a triple output e-power, but it's not a particularly powerful one, so I just use it for short hunting. And then right here, another thing that I've got going on, if I, for whatever reason, happen to need 12 volts, 3.3 volts, or 5 volts, I can just grab them right here, because over there I've got a, I believe 350 watt, just normal ATX power supply. Thing is, this power supply is not just used whenever I happen to need some power. It also powers this fan right here that I just have here for sucking away solder fumes. This thing right here also powers my microscope. Out of the box, this microscope right here, which is an Andon Star 249S-M, requires the use of a 5-volt phone charger, but I modified it so that I can just hook it up to Molex, as you can see right here. Speaking of the microscope, this thing right here is probably one of the best acquisitions I have made in recent times, because this thing, it just makes working on small stuff incredibly easy, right? So if you are doing electronics repair or modification like I am, I highly suggest you go ahead and get yourself one of these. Maybe not this one right here, because this is a more expensive one, but you know, 80 4R7 or 4R9 get you something very usable as well. It's just that those units, I believe, come with a smaller screen, and they also don't have this, or I should say they also don't come with this stand right here, which, as you can see, I bolted right down to my working surface right here. The microscope light, as you can see right here, this is just, I don't know, cheap Amazon thing, runs off of 12 volts, so you can see it's running off of the Molex right there as well, but it's nothing special, just a microscope light. If I turn it around, you can see there's a dial that allows you to dim the light if you wanted to do that for whatever reason. But yeah, that's the digital microscope that I use and the way I got it set up. And moving on, this thing right here is the main camera, the main overhead one that you can see right there. This is a Logitech Brio that I've got on a tripod right here, as you can see. All of these, by the way, including this adapter right here, are off-the-shelf parts. So if you wanted to have a similar setup to what I have here, all you really have to do is find a tripod and then just look up the threads and find an adapter that allows you to mount a camera right here that is also a ball joint. That's the important part. You kind of want a ball joint adapter right here that allows you to move the camera pretty much wherever you want. And over here, this is my soldering station. Nothing special, Ursa something. Oh, there you go, Ursa MS250. I've actually been thinking of upgrading this because this thing right here does a maximum of 32 watts, but the particular tip that I've got right here, if you take a closer look at it, you can see it's just a 25 watt one. So 25 watts is fine for a lot of small stuff, but if you wanted to work on, you know, bigger stuff like I do, you know, e-powers and whatnot, you do want something bigger. That said, I do have a more powerful soldering iron. You have probably seen me use it in the GTX 960 e-power video. Thing is, though, I don't have that one right here. Then over here, this right here is my trusty, good old, well, not old, it's actually quite new, but video encoding machine. This is what the Logitech Brio is plugged in. I do plan on getting a capture card as well that would then also plug in right here via USB, but it's basically just the computer that I use down here for recording video. In case you're wondering, the specifications of this thing include a Core i5-11400F for the CPU, 16 gigs of, I believe, 3200 C16 DDR4. The GPU that is down here is a NVIDIA T600. So it's like nothing too special, but it's plenty for video encoding. And yeah, that is pretty much my workshop setup that I've got going on down here. If you guys enjoyed this video, leave a like on it, subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so already, and I hope to see you guys again in the very next video. Have a good one.